The bridge of the Vindicator smelled of ozone and blood. Captain Dane Keller wiped a streak of sweat from his brow with the back of a grimy glove, eyes fixed on the main display. Shattered hulls drifted in the void. Alien, angular wreckage that had once been the pride of the Galactic Council's fleets. Now, floating tombs. "We've punched a hole clean through their core systems," came the gravelly voice of Commander Holt from the tactical station. "Council signals are collapsing across all bands." Dane didn't answer. His jaw was clenched so tight it ached. This wasn't victory. Not yet. Not until the Council's leaders were ash in orbit, their smug faces erased from existence. Not until the debt was paid. "Status on the Nemesis group?" he barked finally, still pushing through the inner defense grid. Heavy resistance around the Council spire. Holt paused, voice lower now. "We lost the Ragnarok. All hands." Dane's gut twisted, but his face remained stone. The Ragnarok had been one of the first black hull warships. Dark matter engines, classified for decades, built in secret after Earth was humiliated by the Council. After the Treaty of Thalkar stripped humanity of its colonies, its fleets, its pride. He remembered standing on the floor of the Terran Assembly when the Council's envoys, those glistening, posturing lizards, had dictated terms to Earth like a pet to be muzzled. His brother Jacob, a Navy officer, had called it what it was: slavery. 2 weeks later, Jacob's transport was accidentally vaporized by Council patrols. No trial, no justice, just a transmission. Incident regrettable. Case closed. That had been 5 years ago. 5 years of rage. 5 years of black budgets and dead engineers buried in unmarked graves as humanity built what the Council said was impossible. Dark matter war drives, weapons that bent physics itself, hulls invisible to Council sensors, ships designed not to fight fair, but to slaughter. And now, here he was. Dane Keller, captain of the Vindicator, leading the Terran Dark Fleet straight into the heart of Council space. "Bring us about," he ordered, voice low. "Full power to forward batteries. Target the spire." "Aye, Captain." The Vindicator's engines groaned, the hum of compressed dark matter resonating through the deck. Outside, the void shimmered, an oily blackness where the ship's drives twisted reality itself. No Council ship had been able to track them in normal space. Not even their so-called sentient overseers could predict the chaos Earth had unleashed today. Holt looked up, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Message from Fleet Command. Admiral Barrett says, no quarter." "Good," Dane said coldly. "No prisoners." "They showed us none." The spire loomed on the screen now, an ancient construct orbiting the Council's capital world. A beacon of supposed unity, a place where the rulers of 100 species had condemned humanity to second-class status. "Target lock achieved," Holt reported. "Fire." The Vindicator's main batteries screamed to life. Streams of dark energy tore through the void, black lances that made the stars themselves dim. A heartbeat later, they struck home, and the spire erupted in a silent inferno, chunks of alien alloy spiraling outward, its vaunted shield grid nothing but shredded fragments. The bridge crew let out a collective breath, but Dane's eyes remained hard. He could see the Council ships scrambling, what few remained, a last desperate attempt to flee. "Patch me through to fleet," he said. A tone sounded. Across the battered but victorious Terran ships, his voice rang out. "This is Captain Keller. The spire is down. The Council is broken. Pursue and eliminate all remaining hostiles. Today, we take back what was stolen. No mercy, no retreat. Humanity stands alone and unchained." He killed the channel and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, the rage in his chest eased, Just a fraction. The war was far from over. The Council's worlds still stood. There would be reprisals. Blood for blood. But today? Today, they had shattered the unshatterable. "Captain," Holt said quietly. "Incoming transmission, Council Priority Channel." Dane's lip curled. "Put it through." On the screen flickered the image of High Archon Valen, once the most powerful being in the galaxy. Now pale, trembling, eyes wide with fear. "Captain Keller, I implore you, this is madness. Cease this assault. We will negotiate." Dane cut the feed without a word. Negotiation had ended the day they murdered his brother. The Council's core fleets were in full retreat. Scattered formations flickered across the Vindicator's display. Once flawless phalanxes of gleaming alien cruisers, now disorganized prey limping away from the battlefield. Dane Keller stood at the center of the bridge, fists clenched behind his back, watching. Years of humiliation had brought humanity here. Years of enforced disarmament, of protectorate status, of council ships patrolling Terran space like wardens watching over prisoners. And now those same ships ran. Commander Holt's voice cut through the tense quiet. "Captain, Council Sector Command just transmitted a planetary distress call. They're attempting to coordinate a civilian evacuation." Dane's gaze narrowed. "From their homeworld?" "Yes, sir. The Spire's destruction has destabilized their planetary defense grid. They know what's coming." "Good." He walked to the tactical display, a rotating schematic of the Council's capital world below. Velon Prime, a planet that had ruled a galaxy through corruption and arrogance, a place where human ambassadors had once been forced to bow before lesser beings. "How long until Nemesis Group reaches orbital dominance?" he asked. 30 minutes, sir. They've cleared the last battle stations. Remaining planetary defenses are isolated and failing." Holt hesitated. "Admiral Barrett is requesting fleet disposition. She wants to know if we intend to authorize full planetary bombardment." Dane's jaw tensed. That wasn't a question of tactics. That was a question of morality. Or vengeance. No one said the words out loud, but every man and woman in this fleet knew the ghosts they carried. Whole Terran colonies stripped bare. Civilians relocated. Entire populations pacified when they resisted Council rule. And when Earth protested, economic sanctions, starvation, quiet assassinations of Terran leadership. They will remember, Dane thought. We will make them remember. "Tell Barrett to hold position until we break the final defense grid," he said coldly. "No one fires until I give the order." Holt nodded. "Understood." "Any word from special recon teams?" Dane asked. "They've penetrated the lower Spire ruins. Heavy resistance in the inner tunnels, but we've confirmed capture of multiple high-value Council officials." Dane allowed a thin smile. The irony tasted sharp. The Council had always believed humanity was too emotional, too undisciplined to conduct war like their sterile, calculated fleets. They'd forgotten what real hatred could forge. The Dark Matter War fleet had been born from that hatred, and it would not be denied. A fresh comms alert flashed. "Captain," Holt said, voice taut. "Another Council transmission. Velon himself again. He's requesting direct contact, offering terms of surrender." Dane stared at the display. His instincts screamed caution. The Council rarely negotiated in good faith, and when they did, it was because they had no other choice. Still. "Put him through," he said flatly. The main view screen flickered, stabilizing into the gaunt visage of High Archon Velon. Gone was the opulent regalia. The creature looked smaller now, his blue-gray skin pale, ceremonial crest lowered in fear. "Captain Keller," Valen's voice quavered, "I speak for the remaining Council leadership. We acknowledge your fleet's superiority. We propose immediate cessation of hostilities. In exchange for what? Dane cut in, voice ice. Valen swallowed visibly. Safe withdrawal of civilians, guarantees of protection for Council cultural sites, a new treaty recognizing Terran sovereignty. He hesitated. In truth, Captain, this war serves no one. Humanity has proven its strength. The Council can evolve. The hypocrisy tasted bitter. Dane remembered standing in the ruins of Liberty Station, where Council enforcers had executed unarmed Terran civilians for daring to fly their flag. He remembered the cold message announcing Jacob's death. A single data file, no explanation. You want mercy now? Dane's voice was low, dangerous. Where was your mercy when you enslaved Earth, when you murdered Terran citizens in cold blood? Valen's composure cracked. I was not responsible for all actions of— You are the Council, Dane snapped, and you will answer for it. He cut the transmission before Valen could reply. The bridge fell silent. Crew members glanced at one another, but no one questioned the decision. They had all lost something. Family, friends, futures, to the Council's tyranny. Orders, Captain? Holt asked quietly. Dane looked at the tactical display once more. His voice was steel. Signal the fleet, full assault, no quarter. The Vindicator led the charge. Dark matter drives flared, reality warping in the ship's wake. Terran warships, sleek black hulls that seemed to drink the starlight, descended into orbit, formation tight, weapons hot. Council ground defenses opened fire, flinging ion blasts and plasma bolts skyward, but against the Dark Fleet's shields, they were meaningless. One by one, planetary defense stations erupted in gouts of molten metal. Target gridlock achieved, Holt reported. Primary bombardment coordinates locked. Dane nodded once. Fire. A storm of destruction rained down on Valen Prime. Dark energy lances punched through the clouds, obliterating military command centers, starport hubs, orbital defense platforms. Cities that had once symbolized Council dominance now burned. On the bridge view screen, the devastation was undeniable. Whole districts reduced to glass, Council war monuments toppled in fire. It was not clean, it was not honorable, it was justice. Holt's voice came again. Priority update from Special Recon. They've captured a Council data core, classified archives. Command believes it contains evidence of premeditated Council war crimes against Terran populations. Dane's breath caught. Evidence, not just vengeance now. Proof. Proof that the war was righteous, that every life taken today was a debt repaid. Tell them to secure the core and prepare for extraction, he ordered. Hours passed. The planet's resistance crumbled. Fleeing Council vessels were hunted down by Terran strike wings. Dane stood alone in his ready room, staring at the burning planet below. The glow of orbital fires cast strange shadows across his face. He had thought this moment would bring closure. That watching the Council's heart burn would ease the weight he carried. But the rage remained. A deep, cold thing that no victory could erase. A chime sounded, Holt's voice over the comm. Captain, message from Admiral Barrett. She's requesting a fleet council aboard the Iron Requiem, high-level strategic conference. Dane exhaled slowly. The war wasn't over. Not yet. There were still Council worlds untouched, still loyalist fleets gathering in the outer sectors. Retaliation was inevitable, and Earth would need to be ready. Signal my shuttle, he said grimly. I'm en route. The Iron Requiem hung in orbit like a steel god, its dark hull bristling with weaponry, a symbol of the Terran will to fight. Dane entered the War Council chamber, flanked by Holt and two senior officers. Around the massive table sat the architects of humanity's vengeance, Admiral Barrett, stoic and sharp-eyed, Fleet Marshal Corda, scars across one cheek from the first failed council uprising. Director Vance of Intelligence, eyes cold as the void. Barrett stood. Captain Keller, your strike broke their core defenses. The Spire's fall has thrown the Council into chaos. But new intel suggests a regrouping effort in the Drelos sector. High fleet concentrations. Loyalist factions. Corda leaned forward. We have momentum. If we strike now, we can dismantle what remains of the Council's military infrastructure before they can reorganize. Vance added, Intercepted Council comms confirm. Multiple species leaders are panicked. Their trust in Council unity is collapsing. Barrett met Dane's gaze. You led the hammer blow. We want your assessment. Do we push deeper or consolidate? The room was tense. The decision would shape the next phase of the war. Dane spoke without hesitation. We push, hard, relentless. The Council's strength was built on the illusion of invincibility. We've shattered that illusion. Now we finish what we started. No refuge, no safe harbor. We burn them out of the stars. There was a beat of silence, then nods around the table. Barrett's eyes gleamed. Then we prepare for Phase 2. The Drelos offensive begins at dawn. Dane sat back, gaze cold. The war had begun with vengeance, but now it was survival. Humanity had shown the galaxy its teeth. Now they would show them what it meant to cross Earth. The War Council adjourned as silently as it had begun. Orders were already flowing through the encrypted Terran fleet networks by the time Dane Keller returned to the Vindicator. Crews worked in grim, practiced efficiency. There was no celebration. Not yet. Victory here was only the first cut. Dane stood once more on the bridge, watching the tactical display update. New targets blinked in crimson, worlds and sectors long considered unreachable, guarded by Council Corps fleets, now vulnerable, now ripe for the taking. The Drelos offensive would be different from this first strike. The initial assault on Valen Prime had been calculated. Surgical. Cripple the Council, strike fear. But the Drelos sector was where the Council's military had retreated, taking with them their most fanatical loyalist fleets. There would be no quick collapse there, only brutal, drawn-out bloodletting. And that was fine. Humanity could bleed. It had been doing so for generations. Captain, Holt said quietly, approaching Dane at the forward console. Recon teams finished decrypting the first layer of the Council data core. Dane's eyes snapped toward him. And? Holt passed over a data slate. You'll want to read this yourself, sir. Dane scanned the first few lines, and the old rage flared anew in his chest. Project Subjugation. Council Directive, 47 Beta, initiated following the signing of the Treaty of Thalkar. Purpose: systematic suppression of Terran political, military, and scientific development. Included: sanctioned economic sabotage, cultural erasure, and population adjustment protocols targeting resistant demographics. Population adjustment, a sanitized phrase for genocide. The next lines were worse, orders signed by senior council members authorizing the use of biological agents in isolated Terran settlements. Names, locations, proof. He looked up, jaw tight. How many copies? Redundant backups in secure fleet archives now. We've also transmitted the data to the assembly on Earth. They'll go public as soon as the files are authenticated. Holt's voice was hard. The galaxy will know. Dane's fists curled. Let them know. Let them all see the rot at the heart of the so-called Enlightened Council. For years, Terran dissidents had been branded radicals or terrorists for daring to speak of Council atrocities. Now the truth was undeniable. Good, Dane said. Very good. The fleet began its jump sequence hours later. The Vindicator slid into formation with the first wave of the Dark Fleet. black hulls gleaming, weapons charged. Dane's command group would spearhead the assault, supported by the heavy dreadnought Iron Requiem and the carrier Midnight Sun. "Jump coordinates locked," navigation reported. "ETA to Draylos boundary, 9 hours. "Execute," Dane ordered. The dark matter drives engaged with a deep, resonant hum. Space itself seemed to warp, stars smearing into strange geometries as the fleet vanished into hyperspace. In the ready room, Dane met with his senior officers, Holt, Tactical Officer Briggs, and Communications Chief Laurent. The mood was cold, focused. Briggs began. "Recon intel indicates heavy Council force concentration at Draylos Prime. Estimated 4 fleet groups, including multiple heavy cruisers and orbital platforms. Council loyalist warlord Rythus is believed to be in overall command. No love lost for humanity." "That's putting it mildly," Holt added. "Rythus was one of the architects of the forced relocation programs." Dane's eyes narrowed. He remembered Rythus's face, a reptilian sadist who had once boasted that humanity would be pacified within 3 generations. Now he would face the full weight of a Terran fleet forged in hatred. "What about planetary conditions?" Dane asked. Laurent answered. "Draylos Prime is a fortress world. Military-industrial centers, major shipyards, and several deep civilian bunkers. The Council will use them as shields. Expect them to hide behind their own population." Cowards to the end. The Council's high ideals had always been a lie, power and domination dressed in the language of unity. Now, stripped of their veneer, they clung to whatever defense they could muster. "Rules of engagement remain unchanged," Dane said coldly. "No quarter to military targets. Civilian infrastructure is secondary. We will not allow them to regroup." The officers nodded grimly. No one here had illusions about the nature of this war. Mercy was a luxury humanity had never been afforded. 8 hours later, the fleet emerged at the edge of the Draylos system. Dane stood on the bridge as the Vindicator's sensors lit up with enemy signatures. The Council was waiting, a wall of ships, tight formations bristling with weapons, defense grids fully active. "They're dug in," Holt muttered. "Hard." "Good," Dane replied, voice low. "Let's break them." He keyed the fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain Keller to all Terran forces. We face the architects of our people's suffering. They will show no mercy. Neither will we. Engage at will. Burn them out of the stars." The Vindicator plunged into battle, flanked by escort destroyers. Dark matter beams lanced across the void, tearing into Council formations. Enemy ships responded with desperate volleys, ion barrages, and plasma storms. But they could not match the Dark Fleet's speed or firepower. Dane watched coolly as a Council battlecruiser exploded under coordinated fire, its shattered hull spiraling into the planet's gravity well. "Tactical! Focus fire on their command group," he ordered. "We take Rythus's fleet apart first." "Aye, Captain." The Vindicator's batteries roared. One by one, enemy capital ships fell. The Council formations began to falter, ships peeling away in disorder. But Rythus's flagship remained, a massive dreadnought anchoring the defense grid. "Bring us about," Dane said. "Target their flagship." The Vindicator drove in, guns blazing. Council escorts swarmed to defend, but Terran strike wings carved through them mercilessly. "Shields at 80%, Holt reported. "Enemy flagship returning fire." The Vindicator rocked under a heavy salvo, but her dark matter armor held. Dane leaned forward, eyes locked on the tactical display. "Full power to forward batteries. End them." The Vindicator unleashed a withering barrage. Black beams punched through the enemy flagship's hull. Explosions rippled across its surface. "Enemy core overload," Holt shouted. A moment later, the Council dreadnought detonated, an expanding cloud of flame and wreckage. On the bridge, a low murmur of satisfaction ran through the crew. Dane allowed himself a brief nod. One more butcher consigned to the void. With the enemy command broken, the battle tipped decisively. Terran forces pressed the assault, driving surviving Council ships into retreat. Within hours, orbital superiority was secured. The fleet moved into blockade formation, targeting the remaining planetary defenses. Dane surveyed the burning skies of Draelos Prime, a grim satisfaction in his chest. Another Council stronghold reduced. Another blow struck for Earth. But the war was far from over. Deeper sectors awaited, harder battles, greater risks. The Council was cornered now, and a cornered enemy was dangerous. As Dane watched the flames below, Holt approached. "Captain, Fleet Command has received a new intelligence packet from Special Recon. You need to see this." Dane raised an eyebrow. "More Council data?" "Worse," Holt said grimly. "A hidden project. Deep black, off books. Codename, Helios Protocol." He handed over the slate. Dane's eyes narrowed as he read. The Helios Protocol was an endgame weapon, a Council bioweapon project designed for planetary-scale deployment. Target, Earth. Final phase had been scheduled for activation. Next cycle. Dane's blood ran cold. The Council had known they were losing, and in their cowardice, they had prepared genocide as their last act. He looked up, voice iron. "Get me Admiral Barrett, now!" Admiral Barrett's image flickered onto the Vindicator's comms screen moments after the message was sent. Even through the distortion of the secure channel, her expression was hard, eyes sharp as blades. "What have you found, Captain?" she asked without preamble. Dane Keller wasted no time. He slid the decrypted files into the transmission queue and spoke flatly. "Council bioweapon project, codename Helios Protocol. Classified endgame contingency, designed for planetary sterilization. Primary target, Earth. Activation was scheduled for the next Council cycle." For a moment, even Barrett, veteran of more battles than Dane could count, went still. "Details?" she asked, voice low. "Genetic viral agent, engineered for rapid atmospheric dispersal. Synthetic markers tailored to human DNA strands specifically. Project developed under the Directorate of Advanced Biotech, overseen by Archon-level clearance, last known research facility. Coordinates point to the Helixis Deep Complex in the Varath system." Barrett swore, rare venom in her tone. They knew they couldn't win conventionally. They were preparing a final strike. Dane's jaw was iron. "If we hadn't struck when we did, Earth would be ash and bone by now." Barrett's eyes narrowed. "This changes everything. Draelos was meant to be a staging victory, but we can't leave Helios in play. Not even for another day. I want that facility eradicated. Top priority." "Understood. You'll take the first strike group personally, Captain." Barrett's tone was absolute. "We don't trust this to long-range bombardment. We need that site verified destroyed, and if possible, I want that research captured. The Council doesn't get to bury this filth. The galaxy will know exactly what they are." Dane nodded grimly. "One more thing," Barrett added. "Intel suggests internal fractures in the Council leadership. Factions are turning on each other. There's a window of chaos we can exploit. Move fast, hit hard." "Acknowledged." The channel cut. Dane turned to Holt. "Prep the fleet. We jump for Varath in 2 hours. Full battle readiness. This mission takes priority over all other objectives." Holt's expression was grim. "Understood, Captain." The Vindicator's crew worked with cold precision. The fleet reorganized swiftly. Dane selected a strike force of the most battle-hardened vessels. No green ships. This wasn't a campaign objective anymore. This was survival. By the time the dark matter drives spooled to readiness, the strike group hung in formation at the edge of the Draelos system. Sleek, black warships, their hulls gleaming with a predatory sheen. Dane stood on the bridge as the final checks came through. Jump solution locked, navigation reported. Verath system arrival in 7 hours. Execute, Dane ordered. The stars twisted as the Vindicator and her escorts vanished into the void. The Verath system had once been deep Council territory, industrial hubs and research worlds, shielded from prying eyes. Now, with the Council reeling, it was exposed. But even so, Helios was buried deep. Halexis Deep Complex wasn't a city or a military base. It was an underground vault, kilometers beneath the surface of Verath III's barren moon. Shielded, armored, defended by some of the Council's most advanced automated systems. Recon data was sparse. No clear layout. No full defensive schematic, which meant this wouldn't be a clean orbital strike. They would have to go in, boots on the ground, cutting the heart out of the beast by hand. 7 hours later, the strike group dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Verath system. Multiple Council defense satellites detected, Holt reported. No major fleet presence. Automated perimeter. Dane's gaze sharpened. They were counting on secrecy, not strength. Correct. If they call for reinforcements, we'll have a narrow window to complete the mission. Dane keyed the fleet channel. This is Keller, strike group. Begin suppression of orbital defenses. Ground assault wings. Prep for immediate deployment. We take the complex alive and intact if possible. If not, we turn it to glass. The Vindicator's guns opened fire first. Dark matter beams lanced through the void, vaporizing Council defense satellites in seconds. The automated defenses responded sluggishly, clearly not designed for sustained fleet assault. Within 20 minutes, orbital control was established. Dropships launched, sleek, black assault transports descending toward the barren moon below. Dane rode with the first wave. No commander's prerogative would keep him in orbit this time. He would see this mission through with his own eyes. The landing zone was a wasteland of jagged rock and thin atmosphere. The Halexis Deep Complex entrance loomed ahead, a massive armored bulkhead set into the side of a canyon. Automated turrets and defense drones peppered the canyon with fire as the first Terran squads advanced. "Suppressive fire!" came the shout over comms. Terran Marines surged forward, black armored figures moving with lethal efficiency. Heavy weapons barked, drones fell in burning fragments, and within minutes, the outer defenses were breached. Dane led the assault through the main bulkhead, breaching charges tearing through reinforced alloy. Beyond, sterile corridors descended into the depths of the moon. Resistance stiffened inside. Council combat drones, gene-engineered guards, desperate scientists armed with makeshift weapons. But the Dark Fleet Marines gave no quarter. Room by room, level by level they advanced, cutting through opposition with brutal precision. The complex stank of chemicals and burning metal. 3 hours in, they reached the central core. Dane stood over the shattered doorway, weapon in hand, as Holt keyed the final override. The blast door hissed open, and what lay beyond turned even his hardened stomach. Rows of sealed biocontainment pods lined the chamber, each filled with shimmering liquid and suspended viral payloads. Monitors scrolled endless data streams, mutation rates, dispersal patterns, human genetic markers. A figure stood at the far console, a withered council scientist, gaunt and shaking. He raised his hands in surrender. "Don't shoot," the creature hissed. I can deactivate the sequence. The weapon is not yet primed." Dane's weapon didn't waver. "You will deactivate it, now." The scientist scrambled to comply, tapping furiously at the console. Monitors shifted, containment field stabilizing, dispersal sequence locked down. It is done," the creature stammered. "The weapon is neutralized." Dane strode forward, eyes burning. "Explain this project." The scientist cowered. "High Archon order. Contingency for Terran insurrection. No choice. We obeyed." Cowards, all of them. Dane forced down the urge to simply pull the trigger. They needed proof. Holt, secure the data core. I want every file copied. Aye, Captain. Terran techs moved swiftly, extracting the full archive. The Council's darkest secret would be exposed at last. Extraction was brutal. Council stragglers launching last-ditch resistance in the upper levels. But the Terran forces held firm. Hours later, the Helixis Deep Complex lay in ruins, its bioweapons secured, its creators dead or captured. Back aboard the Vindicator, Dane stood before the fleet channel once more. This is Captain Keller. Mission successful. The Helios Protocol is neutralized. Evidence secured. Earth is safe for now. But he knew better than to believe the threat was over. The Council had been willing to wipe out an entire species to preserve its rule. They would not surrender lightly, and the war was far from done. Earth had never known a broadcast like this. From the heart of the Terran Assembly Building, under the battered but unbroken flag of Earth, Admiral Barrett addressed not just humanity, but the galaxy. The Helios Protocol data, fully decrypted, fully verified, now screamed across every open channel. Images of the bioweapon pods, signed orders from Council High Archons, the lists of human settlements marked for extinction, the projected death toll, total planetary sterilization. And one line that played again and again, burned into every watching mind. Primary target, Sol system. Final phase imminent. Dane Keller stood in the war room aboard the Vindicator, watching the ripple effect unfold. Holt and the other senior officers were gathered around the holo display, grim faces illuminated by the steady pulse of emergency alerts. Fleet intelligence reports flooded in. Across neutral systems, species once content to bow to Council power were rising in fury. Riots on Council-aligned worlds, insurrections on border colonies. Even within the Council's own species, cracks were forming. Holt's voice broke the silence. 15 worlds have formally severed ties with the Council in the past 12 hours. Multiple fleets in the outer sectors are refusing orders. The Council's grip is fracturing. Dane's jaw was tight. About time the rest of the galaxy saw them for what they are. But the news was not all good. Laurent, their chief intelligence officer, spoke next. Intercepted Council comms indicate a hardline faction is consolidating power around Archon rival. Military loyalists, extremist elements. They're pushing for full mobilization. Scorched earth strategy. Desperation, Holt muttered. They know the war's turning against them. Dane's gaze didn't waver from the holomap. The enemy wasn't finished. Not yet. A cornered predator was the most dangerous kind, and the Council had been cornered, its mask ripped away, its crimes laid bare. Now it would strike back with everything it had left. 3 days later, the first retaliation came. It wasn't a fleet engagement. It wasn't a political maneuver. It was pure terror. A Council saboteur cell using stealth transport tech likely stolen or copied from Terran designs, infiltrated the outer Terran colony of New Carthage. The result? A biochemical strike on civilian centers. Thousands dead in hours. Not a military target, not a fleet yard. Civilians, families, children. When the report came through, Dane read it in silence. When he finished, he spoke only 3 words. Find them all. The hunt began instantly. Terran intelligence launched a galaxy-wide dragnet, tracking down Council operatives, sympathizers, shadow assets. The rules of engagement were clear. No quarter, no mercy. Dane stood at the center of it, his orders unflinching. The time for restraint was long past. Meanwhile, the front lines surged forward. The collapse of the Council's border sectors opened a brutal new phase of the war. Fleet Marshal Corda led a hammer offensive through the Wylath corridor, crushing Council holdouts, liberating enslaved human and alien populations alike. But the resistance hardened as they pushed deeper. Rivals' loyalist fleets were fanatics, armed with prototype weapons, suicide tactics. The casualty reports rose with each passing day. Entire Terran strike wings lost in meat grinder battles, ground campaigns where victory cost rivers of blood. And yet, there was no turning back. Not anymore. Not after Helios. Not after New Carthage. In the midst of the chaos, a new intel briefing reached the Vindicator. Holt brought it straight to Dane's ready room. Captain, priority intelligence from Special Recon. Source embedded in the Council Inner Circle. Dane scanned the decrypted file, and his blood ran cold. Rivals' faction was preparing a second contingency. Not another bioweapon. Something worse. A doomsday fleet. Black Site warships armed with planet cracker devices. Relics from the Council's ancient wars. Weapons capable of fracturing worlds. And their target list began with Earth. Dane stood in the briefing chamber as his senior officers gathered. "This changes the entire war," he said, voice like steel. "We knew they would retaliate, but this is extinction level." Holt's face was grim. "Fleet intel confirms the existence of the project, codenamed Cataclysm Wing, hidden fleet yards in the Thalren Rift." Briggs, their tactical officer, scowled. "The Rift's a nightmare to navigate. Gravity distortions, ancient minefields. No easy way in." Laurent added, "And no time to wait." "If they launch even one of those weapons, it's over." Dane's eyes burned with cold fury. "Then we go in," he said. "No hesitation. We hunt them down. We tear that fleet apart before it ever leaves the Rift." Admiral Barrett's approval came swiftly. "You have full operational authority, Captain. Take what forces you need. The Rift is yours. Destroy Cataclysm Wing. At any cost." The Vindicator and its new strike group prepared for the deadliest mission yet. Elite assault ships. The fastest dark matter scouts. Veteran crews who had survived the worst of the war. No one else would survive the Rift. As the fleet assembled, Dane met briefly with Barrett via secure channel. "What are we walking into?" he asked bluntly. Barrett's voice was hard. "A trap. Rival knows we'll come. But we have no choice. If Cataclysm Wing launches, Earth burns." Dane's expression didn't waver. "Then we make sure it doesn't launch." "Godspeed, Captain. The fate of our species may well ride on this." Before departure, Dane gathered his crew one last time. No speech, no false promises. Just the truth. "You all know what we're facing. We may not come back. But if we don't go, no one else will. We do this for Earth, for everyone we've lost, for everyone who can't fight." And they answered, not with words, but with cold, steady determination. The fleet jumped for the Thalren Rift that same night. The rift was worse than any chart had suggested. Space itself seemed warped, gravity currents dragging at the ships, sensor readings scrambled. But the Vindicator pressed on, her dark matter drives tuned to pierce the distortions. Council patrols were everywhere, advanced stealth frigates, mines, automated hunter-killers. The first engagement came within hours. "Multiple contacts dead ahead. Evasive maneuvers, weapons hot." The Vindicator danced through the chaos, beams lancing out, tearing enemy ships apart. The rift lit with fire and wreckage. But this was only the outer ring. The true prize, Cataclysm Wing, waited in the heart of the maelstrom, and as they pushed deeper, the cost mounted. Escort ships lost, crews killed, damage to key systems, but still they drove forward. Dane stood unshaken, eyes locked on the display. No matter the cost, no matter the blood, they would finish this. Finally, deep within the rift, the target was found. A hidden fleet yard, massive, ancient, bristling with unfinished warships. And among them, the planet cracker devices, their cores glowing with unstable energy. "Target confirmed," Holt reported. "Cataclysm Wing is here." Dane's voice was iron. "Then we burn it down." There it was, the beating heart of Rival's mad plan. The hidden fleet yard sprawled across a pocket of relative calm within the Thalran rift, concealed beneath a shifting field of sensor-scattering debris and ancient minefields. Council engineers had been working here for decades, unknown even to most of their own kind. And now Dane Keller's fleet had found it. Hanging in the void were the war machines of extinction, a half-dozen immense black-hulled cruisers bristling with weaponry, each one carrying a planet-cracker device fused into its core. One launch, one hit, and Earth would die. But not today. Dane stood at the center of the Vindicator's bridge, gaze locked on the tactical display. "Enemy fleet has detected us," Holt reported. "Defensive grid activating, automated turrets online, hostile strike wings launching." "Time to optimal weapons range?" Dane asked. 5 minutes. He nodded once. "Then we go in hard, full combat spread, all ships, weapons free." The Terran strike group surged forward through the rift's currents, dark matter drives screaming against the gravitational pull. Council frigates closed in fast, sleek predator ships armed with gravitic cannons and plasma lances. "Multiple hostiles inbound," Holt shouted. 70+ contacts. Focus fire, break their formation." The Vindicator's main batteries opened up, hurling black beams into the void. Enemy frigates died in flashes of fire, shredded by the pinpoint strikes. Terran escorts followed close behind, carving through the enemy flanks with ruthless efficiency. But the Council defenders fought like the damned. Suicide drones swarmed the formation, forcing Terran point defenses to the brink. Mines detonated in cascades of white-hot plasma, rocking ships with crippling blasts. "Report!" Dane demanded as the Vindicator shuddered under a near hit. "Shields holding at 65%, Holt replied. "Minor hull breaches on decks 4 and 6. Maintain course. Push through." Ahead, the true enemy waited. Cataclysm Wing, still docked in the massive superstructure of the fleet yard. But already, Council crews were rushing to bring the ships online. Engines powering up, planet cracker cores spinning toward launch readiness. "Estimate on enemy launch prep?" Dane asked. Lawrence's voice was grim. 12 minutes until first ship reaches firing parameters." Not enough time for a clean siege. Not enough time for surgical strikes. There was only one option. Dane keyed the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, prioritize Cataclysm Wing. Close assault. We cannot allow those ships to launch. Burn them down, at any cost." The Vindicator dove straight into the teeth of the defense grid, guns blazing. Dark matter beams sheared through enemy hulls. Terran fighters swarmed the docking arms, laying waste to exposed systems. But the price was high. One by one, escort ships vanished in fireballs, caught in the lethal crossfire of automated batteries and desperate Council defenders. On the bridge of the Vindicator, the battle raged closer and closer. "Multiple hull breaches," Holt shouted. "Shields fluctuating." "Maintain fire," Dane ordered coldly. "Target their engineering sections, cripple them." A new alert flashed across the display. "Captain, enemy flagship undocking," Holt reported. "Planet cracker device charging. Estimated launch readiness. 5 minutes." Dane's gut twisted. If that ship escaped, Earth would die. "Weapons, target that ship. Maximum power. Bring it down." The Vindicator poured fire into the massive cruiser, dark beams slicing through armor and shielding. The enemy ship staggered, but its engines flared to life, dragging it free of the fleet yard scaffolding. Terran bombers swarmed after it, loosing wave after wave of torpedoes, but still it pushed forward. And then, a sudden scream over comms. "Ironclad destroyed," one of their heaviest escorts, gone in an instant, consumed by a planetary defense laser buried beneath the fleet yard. Dane's hands clenched on the railing. They were running out of time, out of ships, out of options. But retreat was unthinkable. "Prepare for ramming course," he said quietly. Holt turned, eyes wide. "Captain, we cannot let that ship reach launch parameters. If we have to ram it, we will." Holt swallowed hard, then nodded. "Aye, sir." But then, a new voice over comms. "Requiem inbound." Admiral Barrett's flagship, the Iron Requiem, had entered the rift, battered, scorched from its own battles, but still fighting. "Barrett to Keller, hold the line. We'll cover your advance." The Iron Requiem plowed through the rift's chaos, guns blazing, drawing enemy fire away from the Vindicator. "Now," Dane barked. "All power to engines. Close on the target." The Vindicator surged forward, closing the gap. Enemy escorts tried to block the path, but were blasted aside by withering fire. At point-blank range, the Vindicator's batteries struck home, dark beams carving deep into the planet cracker ship's hull. Fires raged across its decks. Power readings fluctuated wildly. "Critical hits," Holt reported. "Target destabilizing." And then, the enemy ship erupted in a colossal explosion, its unstable core tearing itself apart. The shockwave hammered the Vindicator, tossing it like a leaf in a storm. But the ship held. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was a graveyard, shattered ships, burning wreckage, drifting bodies. But Cataclysm Wing was no more. The doomsday threat was ended. Dane stood on the battered bridge of the Vindicator, body aching, uniform scorched. "Damage report," he said quietly. "Severe," Holt replied. "Shields gone. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Casualty lists still compiling." And yet, they had won. Dane keyed the fleet-wide channel one last time. "This is Keller. Mission complete. Cataclysm Wing is destroyed. Earth is safe. We hold the line." But as he stood there, staring out at the ruined rift, Dane knew the war was not yet done. Rival still lived. Council remnants still plotted. The final reckoning was yet to come. And when it did, Dane Keller would be ready. The wreckage of Cataclysm Wing still drifted in the cursed shadows of the Thalran Rift when the next orders came. Rival had fled. Not on one of the doomed planet crackers, not aboard a warship. Intelligence reported he'd slipped away on a stealth courier during the chaos. Cowardice dressed in tactical sense. The architect of the Council's worst atrocities, the man behind Helios, behind Cataclysm Wing, behind the New Carthage massacre, still alive. And worse, he wasn't running for safety. He was running for another weapon. Dane Keller stood with Admiral Barrett aboard the Iron Requiem, face carved from stone as the latest intelligence briefing played out in the war room. "New data from recon," Barrett said grimly. "Intercepted communications confirm Rival's heading for the Zero's Abyss." Dane's brow furrowed. The Abyss, a rogue sector beyond even the old Council's grasp. No stable gates, no known trade routes. "What's in the Abyss?" he asked. Barrett keyed the display. A faded star map flickered to life. Ancient, corrupted files. "A pre-Council weapons vault," she said. "One of the original Zerosian arsenals. The Council buried it centuries ago. Weapons from the first galactic wars. Things too dangerous to use." "Or so they claimed," Holt muttered. Dane's fists clenched. "And now Rival wants to use them." Barrett's gaze was iron. "If he succeeds, this war will go beyond genocide. He'll trigger extinction on a galactic scale. We can't allow that." She turned to Dane fully. "I want you to lead this hunt. You know this enemy better than anyone. Take whatever forces you need, track him down, kill him, and if necessary, destroy that vault." Dane didn't hesitate. "I'll bring him back in pieces." The Vindicator was barely holding together after the Rift battle, but repairs were already underway. A lean, deadly task force was assembled, hand-picked veterans from across the fleet. Fast destroyers, dark matter scouts, marine strike teams. No heavy carriers. This wouldn't be a fleet engagement. This would be a chase, a hunt. And when it ended, one of them would be dead. Before departure, Dane stood alone in his quarters, staring at a single holo image. His brother Jacob, lost to the Council's lies years ago. The trigger for all of this. The seed of the hatred that had forged the Dark Fleet. "This ends with you, rival," Dane said quietly. "One way or another." The jump into the abyss was chaos. Gravity storms, spatial fractures. The laws of physics frayed thin across the sector. The task force moved in stealth, slipstreaming through the unstable currents. Council loyalist scouts were already there, rivals' vanguard, ambushes in the dark, hit-and-run strikes, ships dying without warning, sucked into gravitational whirlpools. But the Vindicator pushed on. Dane would not turn back now. On the 6th day in the abyss, a breakthrough. "Captain," Holt reported, "intercepted transmission. Rival's courier pinged one of the vault access nodes. We have a vector." Dane's heart pounded cold in his chest. "Plot intercept. Full burn." The race was brutal. Council hunter-killers swarmed in to block the Terran advance. Fights erupted in the shattered void, running battles amid debris fields and dead stars. Dane led from the front. No hesitation, no retreat. And slowly, relentlessly, they closed the gap. On the 9th day, the vault emerged from the shadows. A colossal station, ancient, cyclopean, half buried in a broken planetoid. Energy signatures flared across its structure as Rival's forces activated it. Dane stared at the display. "He's inside," Holt said grimly. "And arming something," Laurent added. "Energy readings off the scale." Dane's voice was steel. "Prepare boarding teams. We go in." The assault began in fire and blood. Terran dropships punched through the vault's outer defenses, landing amid burning debris. Marines stormed the ancient halls, fighting Council loyalists in brutal, close-quarters combat. The air stank of scorched metal and alien blood. Dane fought with them, weapon in hand, driving forward through the carnage. This wasn't a fleet battle. This wasn't politics. This was personal. Deeper into the vault, the scale of Rival's madness became clear. Experimental weapons, gravitic imploders, dark energy warheads, antimatter plague drones, devices that could erase worlds, stars, entire species. And Rival, desperate, cornered, was trying to activate them. Finally, at the vault's core, the last confrontation. Dane led the strike team through the final blast door, weapons raised. And there he was. Rival, tall, gaunt, eyes burning with fanaticism, surrounded by dead scientists and sabotaged control systems. A single device primed at the chamber's center, a gravitic imploder large enough to collapse the vault, and everything within 100 light years. "Stay back," Rival screamed. "One more step and I trigger it. I will not be taken." Dane stepped forward, weapon steady. "You've already lost," he said coldly. "Surrender or die." Rival laughed, wild, broken. "You think you've won? You think your pathetic species can rule the stars? We are the Council. We are the Order. Without us, there is only chaos." Dane's voice was ice. "Then we'll take chaos. Over your corpse." The standoff seemed to stretch forever. Tension crackled in the air. Marines had fingers on triggers. Then, a flicker in Rival's gaze. A twitch toward the detonator. Dane moved without thought. One shot. One clean shot. Rival jerked, blood spraying, the detonator clattering from limp fingers. He fell, eyes wide with shock. And just like that, the architect of humanity's near extinction was dead. The vault was secured, the weapons neutralized or destroyed. And as the Terran task force pulled back from the abyss, battered but victorious, the news spread like wildfire. Rival was dead. The Council's last great monster, gone. Aboard the Vindicator, Dane stood alone once more. There was no triumph in his heart, only cold, exhausted resolve. The war was not truly over. Council remnants still lingered, battles still raged, but this was the turning point. And one day soon, the final reckoning would come. It began with silence. For the first time in years, no Council fleets patrolled the hyperlanes. No edicts streamed from Velon Prime. No bounty was posted for the head of a Terran officer. Rival's death had broken them. The Council High Assembly fractured within days. Loyalist worlds rose in rebellion. Slave species overthrew their overseers. Council warlords turned on each other, desperate to carve out scraps of power from a dying empire. And at the center of it all, Earth stood, bloodied, vengeful, unbowed. Dane Keller knew better than to call it victory. Victory would mean something pure, something final. This was survival, bought in blood, fire, and the ashes of a galaxy that had once sought to erase humanity. Aboard the Vindicator, now rebuilt and refitted, Dane stood with Admiral Barrett once more. A final war council. One more campaign to plan. The last of the Council's core worlds are holding out, Barrett said, voice low. A coalition of the old guard, fanatics. They're calling themselves the True Order. Dane's gaze was iron. How many systems? 15, Holt answered. Fortified. Militia fleets, old Council dreadnoughts, slaver mercenaries. And their leadership? Dane asked. Barrett's lips thinned. Velon himself. Dane's jaw tensed. That name, that face, the one who had smiled as Earth was stripped of its colonies, who had stood over Jacob's death sentence with impunity. He ran from Velon Prime after our assault, Barrett continued. Now he's holed up on Galathar, last Council bastion. Propaganda's already flowing. He's calling us terrorists, invaders, warmongers. Holt snorted. They called us worse when they had the guns. Dane said nothing for a moment. Then, we finish this. The fleet that gathered for the final assault was the largest Earth had ever fielded. Every surviving dark matter warship, the Iron Requiem, the rebuilt Vindicator, battle-hardened veterans from every front, volunteers from liberated worlds, even defected Council ships, their crews throwing off the old regime. It wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about justice. The jump to Galathar was a storm. Council defenders threw everything they had into the void. Suicide wings, booby-trapped freighters, minefields dense enough to blacken the stars. But the Terran fleet pressed forward, grim and unstoppable. Dane led from the front, the Vindicator's guns blazing. This ends today, he told his crew. We bring their empire down to the bone. The first battles were brutal. Council dreadnoughts fought to the death, entire squadrons ramming Terran ships in mad last stands. Orbital defense grids hammered the fleet with ancient plasma cannons. But the Dark Fleet had learned from years of war. Maneuver, precision, relentless force. One by one, the Council's lines broke. At the heart of the system, Galathar itself burned, a world of gleaming spires and luxury, untouched by the suffering the Council had inflicted elsewhere. Now its skies ran with fire. Terran Marines landed amid the ruins. Street by street, bunker by bunker they fought. And Dane was with them. He would not let Velon escape. Not this time. The final assault came at dawn on the fourth day. Council loyalists barricaded inside the Assembly Citadel, the last seat of their old power. Terran charges shattered the gates. Marines stormed the halls. And at the heart of the Citadel, in a grand chamber lined with alien gold, Dane found him. Velon. Thinner now, older, but still wearing the silk robes of power, still clinging to a tattered pretense of superiority. He looked up as Dane entered, flanked by grim Marines. "So, the Terran butcher himself," Valen sneered. "Come to play conqueror?" Dane leveled his weapon. "Your empire is dead," he said coldly. "You'll answer for every life you stole." Valen laughed. Bitter, broken. "You think this is peace? You think your people will rule in unity? You will become what we were. You will have to. The galaxy demands order, through power or through chains." Dane's gaze didn't waver. "We'll take power then, and no chains." He raised the weapon. Valen's sneer faltered. "You can't—" One shot. Clean. The last High Archon fell. When the Citadel fell, the Council's heart finally stopped beating. The remnants scattered. Some fled into deep space. Some surrendered. Some fought on in forgotten corners of the stars. But the war, the Great War, was done. Aboard the Vindicator, weeks later, Dane stood in the captain's ready room, gazing out at the stars. The Terran Assembly had declared victory. Celebrations echoed from Earth to the Rim. New alliances were forming. New power blocks. The galaxy was remade in fire. And yet, Dane felt none of it. The cost was too high, too deep. The faces of the dead lived behind his eyes. Jacob, the crew of Ragnarok, New Carthage's children, the billions lost. Barrett visited him one final time before returning to Earth. "You've earned your place in history," she said quietly. "The man who broke the council." Dane shook his head. "No. I didn't do this for history." He looked out again, voice low. "I did it so we'd never kneel again." The galaxy was watching now. The Dark Fleet stood unmatched. The Terran banner flew where none had dared before. But Dane knew the truth. The war was over. The struggle was just beginning. Humanity had shattered the old chains. Now it would have to decide what to build from the wreckage. And if the stars demanded a hard hand, then so be it. Because Earth would never bow again. Not while men like Dane Keller still drew breath. The war had been over for nearly a century. At least that's what the galaxy believed. The humans had been crushed, their fleets burned, their colonies erased from existence. The Zalzir Empire had made sure of it. The warship HSS Revenant had vanished in the final battle, assumed destroyed, like the rest of Earth's forces. But now, it was back. A lone, shattered vessel drifted into the outer rim of Zalzir-controlled space. It was enormous, its hull scarred and pitted from battles long past. Strange energy flickered along its structure, and the wreckage of long-dead ships clung to its surface like trophies. The Zalzir station orbiting the planet Velka 9 detected it first. A skeleton crew of technicians watched in confused silence as their sensors struggled to identify the ship. It's impossible," one of them muttered. The captain, a Zalzir veteran named Vos Tal, stared at the screen. The hull signature was ancient, unmistakable. His clawed hands curled into fists. "No," he growled. "It can't be." But it was. The Revenant had returned. The Zalzir had always prided themselves on their ability to conquer, to wipe out those who resisted. The war against humanity had been long, brutal. But in the end, the Zalzir had emerged victorious. Earth was gone. Its cities turned to glass. The last of humanity had been hunted down like vermin. Or so they thought. As the warship drifted closer, Velka 9's defense grid activated. Plasma cannons locked onto the massive vessel, targeting systems primed. Yet the Revenant did not respond. No transmissions, no signs of life. It simply moved, propelled by an unseen force. A junior officer turned to Vostal. "Sir, should we—" The station shuddered violently. Alarms blared. Something had latched onto them, an invisible force dragging the station closer to the warship. Metal groaned. Power flickered. Vostal barely had time to react before a transmission cut through every frequency. The screen flashed with static, then cleared. A face appeared. A human face. But it was wrong. The skin was pale, stretched unnaturally tight. The eyes were black pits of endless void, and when it spoke, the voice carried a chorus of whispers beneath it. "You tried to erase us." The Zalzir officers recoiled. Some clutched their heads, as if hearing a sound too unbearable to comprehend. "You failed." The warship's hull cracked open, revealing something inside. A dark glow pulsed from its core, something alive. The Zalzir fleet scrambled to respond. Warships powered up, missile locks engaged. The station's defenses opened fire, sending plasma lances streaking toward the Revenant. The ship didn't dodge. It didn't raise shields. It simply absorbed the attacks. The energy flowed into its structure, feeding it. The ship grew brighter. The pulsing core flared, and suddenly, silence. Every Zalzir ship froze in place. Lights flickered out. Systems failed. Their weapons melted in their hands. Vostal staggered backward, his body trembling with an unfamiliar sensation. Fear. The voice spoke one last time, its whisper echoing across the dying systems. "We are humanity's vengeance, and we are endless." The Revenant opened fire, and nothing could stop its wrath. The Revenant unleashed its fury. Velka-9's orbital defense grid shattered in an instant, its once impenetrable barriers ripped apart like paper. The warship's weapons did not fire in bright bursts of plasma or missiles streaking through the void. Instead, a wave of something unnatural surged from its hull, black tendrils of energy that ate through metal and flesh alike. Zalzir warships twisted and convulsed as the darkness seeped into them, tearing apart their systems from the inside. Vostal could only watch in horror as his fleet was consumed. "Get us out of here!" he roared, slamming his clawed fist into the console. But his words were meaningless. There was nowhere to go. The Zalzir command ship, Relentless Dominion, fired everything it had. A barrage of high-energy warheads streaked toward the Revenant, detonating in brilliant explosions that could have turned a planet's surface to dust. The blast radius expanded, swallowing the human warship in an inferno of raw destruction. For a moment, there was silence. Then the fire cleared. The Revenant remained, untouched. No hull damage, no shields flickering. It was as if the attacks had never happened. And then it spoke again. "You burned our worlds. You hunted us like animals." The station's walls trembled. Some of the Zalzir crew fell to the ground, clutching their heads, their black eyes bleeding as the voice violated their minds. "Now, you will know what it means to be erased." Vostal turned in desperation to his weapons officer. "Fire! Fire everything!" The station's remaining cannons roared to life, but it was too late. The Revenant extended its dark tendrils once more, and the weapons withered in their sockets, as if time itself had decayed them to dust. A deep rumble filled the station. It wasn't coming from the ship. It was coming from inside. Vostal turned. His crew was changing, their bodies twisted, their exoskeletons cracking as something rewrote them from within. Their voices turned to screams, then to silence. The darkness creeping through the station's walls claimed them, reshaping them into something not Zalzir anymore. He staggered back, his breathing ragged. "No, this isn't possible." A clawed hand, no, not a hand anymore, reached for him from the shadows. His former lieutenant, now a hollowed husk, grinned with a mouth that had never belonged to a Zalzir before. "You should have left us alone, Vostal." The Zalzir commander barely managed a scream before the darkness took him. And outside, the Revenant drifted forward, hunting for its next target. The war was over. But humanity's vengeance had only just begun. The Zalzir Empire had thrived for centuries, spreading its dominion across the stars with ruthless efficiency. But in a single night, Velka 9 had gone silent. No distress signals, no survivors, no explanations. The Imperial command in the Zalzir homeworld, Vorak Prime, received only one transmission before the station was lost, garbled, distorted, filled with static and whispers. The last coherent words came from Vostal himself, his voice twisted by something inhuman. "They are not gone." Then silence. Admiral Koresh Vu sat in the war chamber of the High Council, his mandibles clicking in frustration as he watched the holofeed. Vorak Prime's finest minds were scrambling to explain the impossible. Impossible was the only word that fit. The HSS Revenant was a ship that had been lost a century ago. Humanity had been obliterated. The war was over. And yet, this ghost of a warship had returned, tearing through Velka 9's fleet and leaving behind only emptiness. No debris, no bodies, nothing. It was as if the entire system had been erased. A Zalzir intelligence officer approached the Admiral, her claws tapping nervously against her console. "Admiral, we have a new development." Koresh Vu turned his burning eyes toward her. "Speak." She hesitated. "There was an energy surge before Velka 9 went dark. Our long-range sensors detected it. Something ancient, something we don't understand. It wasn't just a weapon." She swallowed hard. "It was an infection." Koresh Vu's mandibles curled in revulsion. "You mean biological?" "No, sir, worse. It spreads like a virus, but it's not organic. It consumes both flesh and machine. Every ship, every station, every living thing in Velka 9, it's all gone." The council chamber fell into a heavy silence. Koresh Vu exhaled slowly. "Then this is no ordinary warship." "Sir," the officer said, her voice shaking, "if the readings are correct, it's not a warship at all." He narrowed his eyes. "Then what is it?" She met his gaze. "A graveyard." Beyond Vorak Prime's orbit, the Zalzir home fleet, the largest, most powerful armada in the Empire, prepared for war. Battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, and planetary defense stations locked into formation. The Empire would not be caught off guard. They didn't have to wait long. The void trembled. A rupture formed just outside the system, a hole in space, pulsing with unnatural energy. Sensors flickered and died. Communications fell into static. A cold, suffocating presence crept into the minds of every living Zalzir in the system. And then, through the rift, it came. The HSS Revenant drifted into view, larger than before, its twisted hull now covered in the remnants of the ships it had consumed. It was no longer just a warship. It was a monument to the fallen, an amalgamation of vengeance and horror. And it was not alone. Behind it, emerging from the darkness, came more ships, hundreds of them. But they were not human ships. They were Zalzir ships. The very fleet that had once conquered Earth was now part of the Revenant's horde. Their hulls were warped, their lights dead. And yet they moved, crewless, mindless, controlled by something far worse than death. A transmission cut through the dead air, flooding every channel across the Empire. The voice was not human anymore, but it carried the weight of an entire species' wrath. "You thought you could erase us." The Zalzir fleet trembled. But the dead do not forget. The Revenant opened fire, and the Zalzir homeworld burned. Vorak Prime had never known war. The Zalzir homeworld was the beating heart of the Empire, a fortress world with layers of planetary defenses, orbital battle stations, and fleets stationed at every approach. For centuries, they had ruled from the safety of their unchallenged throne. But tonight, the sky was burning. The HSS Revenant led its fleet of the dead straight into the heart of the Empire, and the Zalzir could do nothing but watch as their most powerful ships turned against them. Admiral Koresh Vu stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Blood Oath, gripping the edges of his console so hard his claws cracked the metal. "Report!" he barked. A young officer struggled to respond, his mandibles clicking erratically. "Sir, we can't get a weapons lock. The enemy ships are ours, but they're broadcasting no signals, no crew responses." "They are not ours anymore," Koresh Vu growled. "Fire anyway." The fleet obeyed. Planetary defense cannons unleashed a rain of plasma toward the approaching fleet. Thousands of missiles streaked through the atmosphere, seeking targets. The first waves of undead Zalzir ships were torn apart in brilliant explosions, debris scattering across the void. The Empire's might roared to life. For the first time since the war against humanity, the Zalzir were fighting with everything they had. For a brief moment, Koresh Vu allowed himself to hope. And then the wreckage moved. The remains of the shattered ships did not drift away as expected. Instead, they twisted unnaturally, reforming, their metal plating pulling itself back together. What should have been lifeless wreckage was healing, the very energy from the Zalzir's weapons feeding the Revenant's forces. Koresh Vu's eyes widened in horror. What is this madness?" It was then that the whispers began. Across the command deck, officers clutched their heads, mandibles chattering in pain. The voice, that cursed, unnatural voice, spoke directly into their minds. "We suffered in silence. We died in fire. Now you will know our pain." The screens on the bridge flickered, and for a brief moment, Koresh Vu saw something that should not exist. The shadows behind his officers moved, not the normal shifting of light, but something crawling, something watching. One of the officers turned, his eyes hollow and black, his voice no longer his own. "Admiral." Koresh Vu fired his sidearm. The officer's head snapped back, but he did not fall. Instead, his mouth split open into something grotesque and wrong. He lunged. Panic erupted across the command deck as the infection spread. Officers convulsed, their bodies twisting as something rewrote them, their armor cracking apart as they became something else. Koresh Vu barely managed to activate the emergency lockdown, sealing himself inside his personal escape pod. His heart pounded in his chest as he launched from the bridge, watching as his own flagship was consumed from within. His hands trembled. This wasn't just war. This wasn't even vengeance. This was extinction. From the skies, Vorik Prime's citizens screamed as their once mighty fleet descended upon them, now under the control of the Revenant. Warships that had once protected them now rained fire on the cities below. Defense towers melted as black energy swallowed them whole. The Imperial Palace, a symbol of Zalzir dominance for over 1,000 years, collapsed in a single pulse of darkness, its towers turning to dust. The Empire had always feared humanity's survival. They had never imagined what would happen if humanity came back. And now, it was too late. The last transmission from Vorik Prime was simple. A whisper. "They are still here." The Revenant drifted through the flames, its hunger unsatisfied. It was time to move to the next world. Koresh Vu's escape pod tumbled through the burning sky, buffeted by shockwaves, as the capital city of Vorik Prime was erased. He could barely breathe, his mind reeling as the empire he had sworn to protect crumbled in a single night. Through the pod's reinforced viewport, he saw the fleet, his fleet, now nothing more than twisted husks enslaved by the Revenant. The Zalzir had conquered countless species. They had wiped out entire civilizations. And yet, humanity had done something no one else had. They had refused to die. Kareshvu felt his stomach churn. The Revenant had destroyed Velka 9. It had consumed his dreadnought. And now Vorak Prime, the heart of the Empire, was gone. And yet, the dead warship still hung in orbit. It wasn't moving on, not yet. A cold realization settled in his gut. They are waiting. But for what? Deep within the bowels of the Revenant, something stirred. It had once been human. Now it was something more. A fusion of mind, machine, and something far older than either. It did not think in the way organic life forms did. It did not feel in the way the Zalzir did. It only remembered pain, and it remembered them. The voice of the Revenant whispered through the husks of the Zalzir fleet, its message carrying across the void like a death knell. We were helpless once. We begged for mercy. You gave us none. Across the Empire, every ship, every outpost, every living Zalzir heard the message. Now it is your turn. And then the signal changed. The husks of the Zalzir warships jerked to life, their engines roaring in unison, their weapons primed, but not for Vorak Prime. No, the world was already ash. Instead, the Revenant's fleet turned outward, toward the rest of the Empire, toward every world the Zalzir had ever touched. Kareshvu felt his blood freeze. No. This wasn't just vengeance. This was annihilation. Across the Empire, worlds trembled as the nightmares arrived. Zalzir colonies on distant moons saw their planetary shields fail without explanation. Ghost ships appeared in orbit, silent and unresponsive, until the moment their weapons activated. Outposts that had never known war found themselves engulfed in darkness, their entire populations vanishing in a matter of hours. Entire fleets were lost without a single distress call. The Revenant was not merely killing the Zalzir, it was undoing them, erasing their legacy, their history, their very existence. For every world the Zalzir had burned, for every race they had wiped from the galaxy, the Revenant returned the favor tenfold. And somewhere, deep inside that ship, something watched, something waited, for the Empire to understand. Kareshvu's escape pod crash-landed on Dralkoth, a Zalzir stronghold world just outside Vorak Prime's system. His body ached as he crawled from the wreckage, gasping for air, his mind still struggling to process the impossible. A group of Zalzir officers rushed toward him, their expressions twisted in fear. "Admiral!" one of them cried. You're alive!" Kareshvu staggered to his feet, his mandibles clenching. "You have no idea what's coming." The officers exchanged nervous glances. "We do, sir," another officer whispered. "We just received word from 5 core systems. They're gone, Admiral. Vanished. No distress calls, no survivors, nothing." A silence stretched between them. Then, another officer hesitated before speaking. "Sir, what do we do?" Kareshvu's claws curled into fists. The Empire had ruled through fear for centuries. They had crushed everyone beneath their heel. They had thought themselves gods, and now they were the ones running. His breath came in ragged gasps. For the first time in his life, he realized what it felt like to be hunted. The only thing left to do now was survive. The Revenant loomed in the void, watching, waiting. The galaxy had been so sure that humanity was dead. But the Zalzir had made one mistake. They hadn't just killed humans. They had created monsters. And now those monsters had returned. Not to conquer, not to enslave, but to end it all. Kareshvu had never known fear like this. Not when he had led the Zalzir fleets against the human homeworld. Not when he had ordered the orbital bombardment that cracked Earth's crust, leaving it a burning wasteland. Not even when the last human warships had fought with desperate, suicidal fury. But now, fear gripped him. Dralkoth was supposed to be a fortress world, its defenses second only to Vorak Prime. Yet when Koresh Vu staggered through the underground command center, he saw chaos. Officers shouted over each other, their mandibles clattering in panic. Holoscreens flickered with distorted images of dying worlds. A communication officer turned to him, wide-eyed. "Admiral, it's spreading. It's not just the Revenant. Something is infecting our systems." Koresh Vu narrowed his eyes. "Explain." The officer hesitated, then pulled up a transmission log. "At first, we thought they were simple attacks. Ships burning our colonies, planetary defenses failing. But it's more than that." The logs showed patterns that shouldn't exist. Silent invasions, entire warships shutting down before they could fire a shot. Planetary networks overwriting themselves, deleting archives, erasing records. And then came the whispers. Distorted signals, fragments of voices speaking in broken Zalzir dialects. We were forgotten. We were erased. Now it is your turn. Koresh Vu felt something cold slither down his spine. The Revenant wasn't just killing them. It was undoing them. The Empire was vanishing into nothingness. He turned sharply to his officers. "Tell me we still have control of our fleet." The room fell silent. Finally, a weapons officer spoke. "Sir, we have—" He swallowed, antennae twitching. "We have less than 10% of our ships responding." Koresh Vu's breath hitched. The Empire's fleets numbered in the millions. They had been unmatched in power, their might spanning entire star systems. And yet, in mere days, 90% of their ships had either fallen or gone silent. He clenched his fists. "We need to leave this system, now." A strategist balked. "Admiral, Dralkoth has defenses. If the Revenant comes, we can—" Koresh Vu grabbed the officer's throat, slamming him against the console. "Fool! Vorak Prime had defenses, our best ships had defenses, and they all burned." The strategist choked, mandibles twitching before Koresh Vu released him. "We're not fighting a fleet," the Admiral hissed. "We're fighting something beyond war." Minutes later, Koresh Vu and his most trusted officers boarded a dreadnought, one of the last functioning command ships in the Empire. The Last Oath. It was a relic of an older time, built before the war with humanity. Outdated in some ways, but untouched by the modern Zalzir network systems that the Revenant had begun to corrupt. As the massive warship lifted from the surface of Dralkoth, Koresh Vu stood on the bridge, watching the world below shrink. "Course, Admiral?" the helmsman asked. Koresh Vu's jaw tightened. "We run." "To where?" He hesitated. Where could they go? The Empire was dying. Every core world was falling, one by one. He turned to the navigation console, scanning what was left of their uncharted regions, places the Zalzir had dismissed as unimportant, too distant to conquer. There, a dead system, a forgotten outpost at the edge of the galaxy, uninhabited, hidden. Koresh Vu's claw tapped the screen. "Take us there." The helmsman obeyed, and the Last Oath's engines roared as it leapt into faster-than-light travel, leaving Dralkoth behind. But as they vanished into the void, Koresh Vu saw something. For just a moment, before the ship jumped, the sky above Dralkoth darkened. Not from nightfall, not from warships, but from shadows. Something unnatural moving through the stars, reaching toward the planet below. Koresh Vu's breath caught in his throat. They weren't escaping a war, they were escaping extinction. Deep inside the Revenant, something stirred. It had felt Koresh Vu's presence. It had seen him run, the last of the Zalzir leadership, the last remnant of the Empire that had burned Earth to the ground. The voice of the Revenant whispered through the remains of its fleet. "Let him run. Let him watch. Let him understand." The Revenant turned its attention back to Dralkoth. The world trembled, and then the shadows descended. Dralkoth ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just emptiness. Koreshvu stood on the bridge of the last oath, staring into the void. The dreadnought hurtled through faster than light space, escaping the dying core systems of the Empire. But Koreshvu didn't feel relief. He felt the weight of something far worse. He turned to his officers, their expressions still raw with panic. "Status?" he demanded. A communications officer swallowed hard. "Dralkoth is gone, Admiral." Koreshvu's mandibles twitched. "Destroyed." "No, sir," the officer whispered. "Not destroyed. Erased." Koreshvu clenched his fists. He had seen planetary destruction before. He had ordered it. A world under bombardment cracked, crumbled, left a field of debris. Dralkoth should have left a corpse. But instead, the entire system had simply vanished. As if it had never existed. The officers on the bridge were silent. No one spoke of it, but they all felt the same thing, the same cold dread curling in their chests. The Empire wasn't dying in fire and war. It was being unmade. The dreadnought hurtled toward the fringe systems, moving toward a sector the Zalzir had ignored for centuries. Koreshvu had chosen this destination because no one else would think to go there. If the Empire was collapsing, then the only chance of survival was to hide in the forgotten corners of space. But something gnawed at him. A question he dared not speak aloud. Was there anywhere left to hide? 3 days passed. The last oath had not been followed. No Revenant ships, no transmissions, no whispers in the void. The silence was unnatural. The crew began to hope. Maybe they had escaped. Maybe the Revenant had moved on. Koreshvu did not believe it, and when the nightmares finally returned, neither did they. It started in the lower decks. The engineering crew was the first to vanish. No alarms, no signs of struggle. One moment they were running diagnostics on the hyperdrive. The next, their stations were empty, uniforms and tools left behind, as if the bodies had simply ceased to be. A patrol unit was sent to investigate. They did not return. The officers panicked. "Something is inside the ship," a lieutenant gasped, his mandibles clicking in terror. "Security teams, sweep the lower levels," Koreshvu ordered. They armed themselves. They marched into the depths of the dreadnought. But all they found were whispers, soft voices, flickering through the comm channels, distorted echoes in empty corridors. "We were erased. We were forgotten. Now, so are you." Koreshvu watched the bridge crew fracture. The bravest officers tried to keep order, but fear was spreading like a plague. He could see it in their twitching antennae, in the way their claws trembled over consoles. The Zalzir had always ruled through fear. They had never felt it themselves. Now they understood what it was to be hunted, and the Revenant was watching. Koreshvu turned sharply to the helmsman. "Get us out of here anywhere, now!" The helmsman's claws flew over the controls, but then he froze. "Admiral," he choked. I don't understand." Koreshvu marched toward the console. "What is it?" The helmsman pointed to the navigation screen. There was nothing there. No star maps, no recorded jump points. The universe itself was gone. The whispers grew louder. "You burned us. You erased us. Now we erase you." Koreshvu grabbed the helmsman by the shoulders, shaking him. "Find a way out." I can't, sir," the officer stammered. "The navigation logs, our records, they're all gone. It's like we were never here." Koreshvu turned to the rest of the bridge. "Manual override, restart the navigation systems." Another officer let out a horrified sob. "It won't work, Admiral." He pointed at his console. The Zalzir language was vanishing. Their screens were filled with human letters, symbols from a language they had wiped from the stars. "We remember." Kareshvu felt his breath hitch. His empire had erased Earth, and now Earth's ghosts were returning the favor. One by one, his officers disappeared. Not in violence, not in fire, just gone. A blink, a whisper, nothing, until only Kareshvu remained. The bridge was silent. He stood alone, staring at the dead hollow screens, his own reflection barely visible against the dim glow of the emergency lights. The Revenant had spoken. There would be no mercy. Kareshvu's claws curled into trembling fists. "You want me to suffer," he whispered. "You want me to understand." A voice answered, not over the comms, not through the ship. It was inside his mind. "You will." The bridge vanished. The ship vanished. And then, Kareshvu was somewhere else, somewhere impossible, somewhere that should not exist. Kareshvu awoke in darkness, not the familiar void of space, not the sterile, metallic halls of his dreadnought. This was something else, something wrong. The air was thick, oppressive. It buzzed with whispers, voices just beneath the surface of reality. He could feel them in his bones, vibrating like an echo of a scream that had never ended. "You burned us. You erased us. Now we erase you." Kareshvu reached for his sidearm. It wasn't there. His armor, gone. His command insignia, gone. He wasn't an admiral here. He was nothing. And then the darkness shifted. A shape emerged, towering, humanoid, yet impossibly wrong. Its body was a patchwork of shadows and light, shifting like static. Its face, a human face, flickered in and out of existence, sometimes a skull, sometimes a burning star, sometimes something else entirely. Kareshvu had faced the horrors of war. He had conquered entire species. He had never felt fear like this. "Where am I?" he growled, forcing his voice to remain steady. The entity didn't move, didn't breathe, but the whispers did. "You are where we were, where you left us to die." Kareshvu's mandibles clenched. "Impossible. Your kind was destroyed," the darkness pulsed. "Yes, we were. We felt it. We remember it. Do you?" Suddenly, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were screams. Kareshvu was no longer standing. He was falling. The void around him ripped open, and suddenly he was there. Earth, or what was left of it. Flames devoured the continents. Black smoke choked the skies. The oceans boiled under the relentless assault of the Zalzir fleet, their dreadnoughts casting long, monstrous shadows over the ruins of human civilization. He remembered this day. He had stood on his bridge, watching in cold silence as Earth was reduced to nothing. And yet, he was here now, living it. He turned, his breath hitching. The burning streets of a human city stretched before him. Not just any city. New York. He knew it from the pre-war archives, the footage taken by Zalzir spies before the war. Once a symbol of human ambition, defiance, and pride. Now, it was a graveyard. Bodies littered the ground, charred, broken. Some still moved, crawling through the ash, their flesh melting off their bones. A mother clutched a child to her chest, rocking back and forth, singing in a tongue he did not understand. A song of mourning. A song of death. Kareshvu tried to step forward, but the world would not let him. He relived it all. The war. The slaughter. The moment the last human signal was silenced. And yet, something was different. The dead did not simply fade. They watched him. Their hollow eyes followed his every move, their burned mouths forming silent words. "We remember? We remember. We remember." And then the world shattered. Kareshvu was back in the void. The shadowed entity loomed before him, its ever-shifting form pulsing with the agony of a million forgotten voices. "Now you know." Kareshvu trembled. He had seen war. He had caused war. But he had never felt it like this. The Revenant had taken more than his fleet, more than his empire. It had taken his certainty. You are not human, he whispered. The entity shifted. A face emerged from the static. A woman's face, human. Her eyes burned with something beyond hatred, beyond vengeance. Koreshvu swallowed. What do you want? The voices spoke as one. Justice, he exhaled sharply. Then kill me. The void rippled. The entity leaned forward, its terrible form inches from his own. No. You will live. You will return. And you will carry our memory. Koreshvu's breath hitched. The universe collapsed around him. He awoke on the bridge of the last oath. Gasping. Shaking. His officers stood frozen, their eyes locked on him in horror. He turned to the viewports. Space stretched before them. Normal space. The dreadnought was intact. No whispers. No missing crew. It was as if nothing had happened. But it had. He felt it in his chest, the weight of a dying world pressed against his soul. Koreshvu stumbled forward, gripping the edge of his command console. His officers hesitated, waiting for orders, waiting for him. He inhaled shakily. Then, for the first time in his life, Koreshvu gave the order to retreat, not from battle, not from war, from justice, from vengeance, from the ghosts of a world his empire had tried to erase. But they would never be erased. They would always remember. And now, so would he.